The Caltharian medical station orbited the gas giant Nexus Prime like a silver needle threading through cosmic silk. Dr. Zethara pressed her six-fingered hands against the observation deck's transparent aluminum, watching the swirling storms below while her mind churned with failure. Behind her, the soft hum of advanced medical equipment filled the sterile corridors, but even the most sophisticated technology in the known galaxy had proven useless against their current patient. "Still no progress?" asked Commander Vilex, his crystalline exoskeleton catching the artificial light as he approached. The Zeridian officer's voice carried the weight of diplomatic pressure from 17 different species councils, all demanding answers that Zethara simply did not have. "None," she replied, her elongated skull fins drooping with exhaustion. "The barnacle colonies have spread another 12% since yesterday. At this rate, King Fenris will be completely immobilized within the next rotation cycle." The Caltharian doctor had spent the equivalent of 3 Terran months studying the most peculiar medical case in recorded galactic history. King Fenris of the Lupine Dominion, ruler of 37 star systems, and commander of the most feared military force in 3 galactic arms, was dying. Not from battle wounds or assassination attempts, but from millions of microscopic parasitic organisms that had somehow bonded with his cellular structure. The Barnacles, as they had come to be called, were unlike anything in the medical databases. They appeared to be a hybrid of biological and quantum mechanical properties, existing simultaneously in normal space and subspace. Each one was no larger than a grain of sand, but when millions attached to a living host, they created an impenetrable shell that grew stronger with each passing day. "The Hegemony Council is losing patience," Vilex warned, his antenna-like sensors twitching nervously. "If King Fenris dies, the Lupine Dominion has already declared they will consider it an act of war against the entire Galactic Medical Alliance. They believe we are deliberately allowing their leader to die." Zethara turned away from the window, her large eyes reflecting the weight of potential intergalactic conflict. "We have exhausted every known treatment protocol. The Vegan nanosurgeons cannot penetrate the quantum barrier. The Altarian biodisruptors only make the barnacles multiply faster. Even the Arcturian reality shapers admit defeat." She gestured toward the secure medical bay where King Fenris lay in stasis. "The barnacles have developed resistance to 14 different classes of treatment. They seem to learn and adapt from each attempt we make. It is as if they possess a collective intelligence specifically designed to counter our medical technology." The truth was even more disturbing than Zethara let on. The barnacles were not just resistant to treatment, they were actively hostile to most forms of galactic medical intervention. When the crystalline healers of Proxima had attempted their light-based therapy, the barnacles had absorbed the energy and grown larger. When the gaseous physicians of the Nebula Collective had tried their molecular dissolution techniques, the parasites had released toxic compounds that nearly killed the patient. King Fenris himself had become a living fortress of suffering. The proud lupine warrior, who stood nearly 3 meters tall and commanded respect from species across the galaxy, was now reduced to a barely conscious form encased in a shell that grew thicker each day. His wolf-like features were barely visible beneath the crusty, pearl-like surface of billions of microscopic organisms. The medical station housed representatives from 43 different species, each bringing their unique approaches to healing. The insectoid Manthari had attempted to use their natural ability to digest complex proteins. The energy-based Luminari had tried to disrupt the barnacle's molecular bonds through controlled radiation. The amphibious Nereidans had experimented with biological acids that could dissolve most known materials. All had failed. Dr. Kelvix of the Andromedan Science Corps approached Zethara with his latest findings. The gray-skinned humanoid carried a data tablet that displayed microscopic imagery of the barnacles in various states of activity. "I have completed the quantum analysis you requested," he said, his voice modulated by the translation device at his throat. "The results are unprecedented." Zethara accepted the tablet and studied the complex diagrams. "Explain these readings." "The barnacles exist in a state of quantum superposition," Kelvix began, pointing to specific data clusters. "They are simultaneously alive and not alive, organic and inorganic, present and absent. This is why our treatments fail. When we target their biological components, they shift to their inorganic state. When we attack their physical presence, they phase partially out of normal space-time." The implications were staggering. The parasites had evolved or been engineered to exist in multiple states of reality simultaneously, making them effectively invulnerable to any single form of attack. It was as if someone had created the perfect biological weapon designed specifically to defeat the advanced medical capabilities of galactic civilization. "Where did these organisms come from?" Vilex asked, studying the data over Zethara's shoulder. "Unknown," Kelvix replied. "They share genetic markers with species from over 200 different worlds, yet they match none exactly. Some components appear to be artificially constructed, while others show signs of natural evolution spanning millions of years." The mystery deepened when they considered how King Fenris had become infected. The lupine leader had been exploring a derelict space station in the Outer Rim territories when his ship had discovered what appeared to be an abandoned research facility. The structure was clearly ancient, predating all known galactic civilizations, and contained technology that defied current understanding of physics. King Fenris had insisted on personally investigating the facility, despite protests from his security detail. Within hours of boarding the station, he had begun showing symptoms of the barnacle infection. By the time his rescue team extracted him, millions of the microscopic parasites had already bonded with his cellular structure. The derelict station had subsequently been quarantined and studied by teams of xenoarchaeologists and xenobiologists. They discovered that the facility contained laboratories filled with specimens from hundreds of different species, including many that had been extinct for millennia. It appeared to be some kind of biological research center, though its creators remained a mystery. "The station's computer systems are completely incompatible with our technology," reported Dr. Thane, a cybernetics expert from the Synthetic Intelligence Collective. "What little data we can extract suggests the facility was used for genetic experimentation on a scale that makes our current capabilities look primitive." Zethara found herself wondering if the barnacles were not a natural parasite at all, but rather some kind of biological security system designed to protect the ancient facility's secrets. If so, then King Fenris had become the victim of a trap set by a civilization that had vanished long before the First Galactic Alliance was formed. The political ramifications of the situation grew more serious each day. The Lupine Dominion was a military powerhouse that had maintained peace through strength for over a century. Their fleet controlled crucial trade routes and served as a buffer against hostile forces from the galactic edge. If King Fenris died and the Dominion collapsed into civil war or sought revenge against the Medical Alliance, the resulting conflict could destabilize the entire galactic community. Ambassador Helix of the Diplomatic Corps arrived at the station with urgent dispatches from the Galactic Council. The ethereal being's translucent form shimmered as it delivered its message. "The Council has authorized any and all measures necessary to save King Fenris. Budget constraints have been lifted, and emergency powers have been granted to medical personnel." Zethara appreciated the gesture, but unlimited resources meant nothing when facing an impossible medical challenge. "We need new approaches, not just more of the same failed treatments." "What about biological warfare specialists?" suggested Commander Vilex. "Perhaps someone with experience in combating exotic parasites." "Already consulted," Zethara replied wearily. "The best experts in the galaxy have reviewed our data." The consensus is that the barnacles represent a form of life so alien to our understanding that conventional biological warfare techniques are useless. The medical team had even attempted to communicate with the barnacles, thinking they might possess some form of collective intelligence that could be negotiated with. The universal translators had detected patterns that suggested complex information exchange between the organisms, but nothing that resembled language or consciousness as galactic species understood it. Dr. Yilan of the Telepathic Consortium had tried to establish mental contact with the parasites, but reported that touching their consciousness was like trying to grasp liquid quantum mechanics with pure thought. They exist in a state of mind that transcends individual awareness, she had explained. It is not intelligence as we understand it, but something far more alien. As the days passed, King Fenris's condition continued to deteriorate. The barnacle shell had grown so thick that even the most advanced sensors could barely detect life signs from within. The lupine's incredible constitution was the only thing keeping him alive, but even that was being slowly overwhelmed by the parasitic drain on his system. The medical station received daily communications from across the lupine dominion, where millions of wolf-like beings prayed for their leader's recovery. Religious ceremonies were held on dozens of worlds, and ancient healing rituals were performed in hopes of reaching across the stars to aid their dying king. Zethara found herself working 18-hour days, pushing the limits of her species' endurance as she searched for any possible breakthrough. She had access to the accumulated medical knowledge of hundreds of civilizations, quantum computers capable of processing quintillions of calculations per second, and resources that would have seemed like magic to earlier generations. None of it mattered against an enemy that existed outside the normal parameters of reality. The breakthrough, when it came, was not from advanced technology or alien wisdom. It arrived in the form of a single transmission from a previously unknown source, requesting permission to dock at the medical station. The message was brief and transmitted on primitive radio frequencies that most galactic civilizations had abandoned millennia ago. "This is Dr. Sarah Chen of the Terran Medical Corps," the transmission began in heavily accented galactic standard. "We understand you have a patient suffering from quantum biological parasitism. We request permission to assist." Commander Vilex's crystalline features shifted in confusion as he reviewed the transmission data. "Terran? That is the species from Sol system, correct? The ones who just achieved faster-than-light travel?" Zethara nodded slowly, remembering the recent reports about humanity's rapid technological development. Their homeworld was granted provisional membership in the galactic community only 50 rotations ago. They are considered a primitive species barely past the early spaceflight stage of development. "Then why are they offering medical assistance?" Vilex asked. "Their technology cannot possibly be advanced enough to help where we have failed." The question hung in the sterile air of the medical station as both officers contemplated the implications. Humanity was known throughout the galaxy as a young, aggressive species that had somehow developed faster-than-light travel despite lacking many of the fundamental scientific advances that other civilizations considered prerequisites. They were regarded with a mixture of curiosity and condescension by most galactic powers. Yet here was a human doctor claiming to understand a medical condition that had defeated the greatest minds in known space. "Sir," interrupted a junior technician at the communications console, "the human vessel is requesting immediate docking clearance. They claim time is critical for the patient's survival." Zethara looked at the deteriorating readings from King Fenris's medical chamber. The barnacle growth had accelerated in the past few hours, and their quantum mechanical nature was causing increasing instability in the surrounding space-time continuum. If something did not change soon, the lupine leader would die, and with him, the stability of 3 galactic sectors. "Grant them docking permission," she decided. "At this point, we have nothing to lose and everything to gain." As the human medical ship approached the station, Zethara found herself wondering what possible insights a primitive species could offer to their impossible situation. The answer, she suspected, would either save King Fenris or provide one final confirmation that the case was truly hopeless. The docking clamps engaged with a satisfying thunk that echoed through the station's corridors, followed by the hiss of atmospheric equalization systems. Within minutes, the human medical team would board the station and either prove themselves capable of miracles or demonstrate the limitations that kept their species on the periphery of galactic civilization. Either way, Zethara thought as she prepared to meet Earth's representatives, the next few hours would determine the fate of not just one patient, but potentially the entire galactic community. Dr. Sarah Chen stepped through the airlock with the kind of confidence that made seasoned galactic physicians do double takes. She was unremarkable by human standards. Average height, brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Wearing a simple medical uniform that looked positively primitive compared to the advanced biosuits worn by other species. Yet something in her steady brown eyes suggested she saw the universe differently than the assembled alien doctors. "Dr. Chen, I presume," Zethara said, extending her six-fingered hand in greeting. "I am Dr. Zethara, Chief Medical Officer of this facility. I must admit, your offer to assist came as something of a surprise." Sarah shook the offered hand with a firm grip that surprised the Caltharian. Most primitive species were either overly aggressive or intimidatingly submissive when meeting advanced galactic civilizations. This human seemed to regard her alien colleagues as simply that. Colleagues. "The surprise is mutual," Sarah replied, her eyes already scanning the medical facility with obvious interest. "I've never seen quantum biological parasitism outside of theoretical models. This is actually quite exciting from a research perspective." Dr. Kelvix of the Andromedan Science Corps approached with visible skepticism written across his gray features. "Dr. Chen, while we appreciate your willingness to help, I should point out that this case has defeated the combined efforts of 43 different species' medical expertise. The quantum mechanical nature of the parasites makes them essentially invulnerable to conventional treatment." Sarah nodded thoughtfully, then surprised everyone by pulling out what appeared to be a primitive handheld scanning device. "May I see the patient?" The assembled medical team exchanged glances. The human's equipment looked like something a first-year medical student might use for basic examinations. Zethara felt obligated to explain the sophisticated monitoring systems they had employed. "We have quantum resonance scanners that can analyze molecular structures down to the subatomic level," she began. "Multidimensional imaging systems that can track the parasite's quantum state transitions, and—" "Those all sound very advanced," Sarah interrupted gently. "But sometimes the most sophisticated tools miss the obvious things. May I examine King Fenris?" Reluctantly, Zethara led the human to the isolation chamber, where the lupine leader lay in stasis. The sight was disturbing even to medical professionals accustomed to exotic conditions. What had once been a proud warrior nearly 3 meters tall was now encased in a pearl-like shell of microscopic organisms. The barnacles had grown so dense that King Fenris looked more like a bizarre sculpture than a living being. Sarah approached the chamber and activated her primitive scanner, running it slowly along the containment field that kept the patient isolated from the rest of the station. The device emitted simple beeps and displayed basic readouts that looked laughably crude compared to the quantum-level analysis equipment surrounding them. "Interesting," she murmured, studying the simple display. "The barnacles show synchronized biorhythms." "Of course they do," Dr. Kelvix said with barely concealed irritation. "They operate as a quantum collective consciousness. We established that weeks ago." Sarah looked up from her scanner with a slight smile. "Yes, but look at the frequency." She showed her readout to the assembled alien doctors. They're matching King Fenris's heartbeat, not operating independently. Zethara frowned at the simple display. Our quantum analyzers show them operating in superposition across multiple dimensional phases. Single-frequency synchronization would be impossible given their quantum nature. Would it? Sarah asked, pulling out what appeared to be an ancient stethoscope. May I get closer to the patient? The request sent ripples of alarm through the medical staff. Dr. Yilan of the Telepathic Consortium stepped forward urgently. Dr. Chen, the containment field is there for protection. The Barnacles have shown aggressive responses to close examination. They may attack any threatening presence. Sarah paused, considering this warning, then shrugged. Well, they haven't met a human yet. Before anyone could stop her, Sarah had activated the containment field controls and stepped inside the isolation chamber. Alarms immediately began sounding as multiple species of medical professionals shouted warnings in a dozen different languages. "Sarah, get out of there!" called Dr. Martinez, her human colleague who had remained by the chamber entrance. "We don't know how those things will react to human physiology." But Sarah was already kneeling beside the crystallized form of King Fenris, pressing her primitive stethoscope against the shell of Barnacles. Her face showed intense concentration as she listened to whatever sounds penetrated the parasitic barrier. "Remarkable," she whispered, then louder. "They're not just mimicking his heartbeat, they're responding to it. The synchronization isn't quantum mechanical, it's biological empathy." Dr. Kelvix manipulated the external scanners to focus on the chamber interior. The quantum readings are unchanged. The parasites show no alteration in their superposition state. Sarah looked up from her stethoscope. "That's because you're looking for quantum changes. Try monitoring for electromagnetic fluctuations in the 0.5 to 50 Hz range. Those are primitive biological frequencies," Zethara protested. "Our equipment is designed to detect much more sophisticated energy patterns." "Humor me," Sarah said, continuing her examination. She had placed her hands directly on the barnacle shell and was moving them slowly across the surface. To the horror of the watching medical team, the parasites seemed to be responding to her touch, shifting and moving in patterns that had never been observed before. Reluctantly, Zethara adjusted the monitoring equipment to scan for the basic electromagnetic frequencies that primitive life forms used for communication. The results were immediately shocking. "By the 7 moons of Altair," she breathed, staring at the readouts. "The parasites are generating coherent biological field patterns. They're communicating using bioelectricity." Sarah nodded, her hands still moving across the shell. "It's more than communication. They're trying to heal him." The statement sent a wave of incredulous murmurs through the assembled medical professionals. Dr. Yilan spoke for all of them when she said, "That is impossible. The parasites are clearly causing harm. They are draining King Fenris's life force and preventing normal metabolic function." "Are they?" Sarah asked, pulling out another primitive instrument that looked like a combination of a tuning fork and a metal detector. "Or are they trying to protect him from something worse?" She activated the device and began scanning the immediate area around the isolation chamber. Within moments, it began emitting rapid clicking sounds that indicated the presence of some kind of energy signature. "Dr. Chen," Commander Vilek said with obvious concern, "what are you detecting?" Sarah studied her instrument readings with growing alarm. "Radiation, specifically quantum-dimensional radiation that would be lethal to organic life forms. It's saturating this entire area of space." The alien doctors exchanged confused glances. Dr. Kelvix checked his sophisticated sensors. "Our quantum field detectors show normal background radiation levels. Nothing that would pose a threat to biological organisms." "Your detectors are looking for quantum-level radiation," Sarah explained, continuing her scan. "This is something different. It's operating in the transitional zone between quantum and classical physics. Most advanced civilizations wouldn't even think to look for it because their technology has moved beyond that level of analysis. She paused, studying her readings more carefully. The radiation signature is artificial. Someone or something is broadcasting this energy, and it's designed to be lethal to carbon-based life forms. The implications of her statement hit the medical team like a quantum shock wave. If Sarah was correct, then King Fenris was not suffering from a parasitic infection, but rather from an environmental attack that the Barnacles were somehow protecting him against. "Show us," Zethara demanded, her scientific curiosity overriding her skepticism about primitive human technology. Sarah pointed her device toward different sections of the medical station. The clicking sounds varied in intensity, growing stronger near certain bulkheads and weaker in others. The radiation is coming from outside the station. Something in local space is broadcasting this energy pattern. She turned to face the assembled medical team. "I think King Fenris's exploration of that ancient space station activated some kind of defensive system. The Barnacles aren't parasites. They're a biological shield created by the station's automated systems to protect him from a weapon that was never turned off." Dr. Thane of the Synthetic Intelligence Collective processed this information with mechanical precision. "If your hypothesis is correct, then our treatment attempts have been counterproductive. We have been trying to remove the very thing keeping our patient alive." Sarah nodded grimly. "Worse than that? Every time you attack the Barnacles, they have to work harder to protect King Fenris from the radiation. That's why they keep growing, and why his condition deteriorates despite your efforts to help." The realization sent shockwaves through the medical facility. Months of dedicated treatment had actually been harming their patient. The most advanced medical minds in the galaxy had completely misunderstood the nature of the problem they were trying to solve. "But how did you determine this so quickly?" Zethara asked. "Your equipment is primitive compared to our quantum analyzers." Sarah smiled and tapped her stethoscope. "Sometimes primitive is better. Your quantum scanners are designed to look for complex patterns and advanced phenomena. They filter out simple biological signals as background noise. But the Barnacles aren't quantum organisms. They're biological ones that happen to interact with quantum fields." She gestured toward King Fenris's crystallized form. "The Barnacles are actually a masterpiece of biological engineering. They're converting the deadly radiation into harmless energy while maintaining the host's life functions in a protected environment. It's the most sophisticated medical intervention I've ever seen." Dr. Kelvick studied his quantum readings with new understanding. "The superposition states we detected, they are not the Barnacles existing in multiple realities. They are the Barnacles processing and neutralizing radiation that exists between dimensional phases." "Exactly," Sarah confirmed. "The ancient civilization that built the space station was dealing with threats that operated across multiple dimensional levels. They created biological defenses that could protect against attacks that conventional technology couldn't even detect." The medical team began frantically recalibrating their equipment to search for the radiation signature that Sarah's primitive detector had found. Within minutes, they confirmed her findings. The space around the medical station was indeed saturated with a form of radiation that would be lethal to most organic life forms, and it was growing stronger. "The source appears to be the quarantined space station," reported Dr. Thane after running a comprehensive sensor sweep. "The radiation levels have been increasing steadily since King Fenris first entered the facility." Commander Vilex felt his crystalline exoskeleton chill with implications. "Are you saying that the ancient station is attacking this medical facility?" Sarah checked her readings again. "Not attacking, defending. King Fenris's life signs are still being transmitted from inside the Barnacle shell. The station's systems think he's still aboard and under threat. They're projecting a defensive field to protect him from whatever they perceive as hostile forces." The situation was becoming more complex by the hour. Not only was King Fenris not suffering from a parasitic infection, but the ancient space station was actively trying to protect him using technology that predated galactic civilization. The Barnacles were not enemies to be defeated, but sophisticated medical devices created by a culture that understood biological engineering in ways that current science could barely comprehend. "So, how do we save him?" Zethara asked. "If removing the Barnacles will kill him, and leaving them will eventually drain his life force, what options do we have?" Sarah was studying her primitive scanner with intense concentration. "We need to convince the station systems that King Fenris is safe. If we can communicate with the ancient automation and tell it to stand down, the Barnacles should release him naturally." "Communication with technology that old may be impossible," Dr. Thane pointed out. "The computational systems are completely incompatible with current interfaces." "Maybe," Sarah said thoughtfully, "but King Fenris managed to activate the system somehow. There must be a way to interact with it." She turned to address the entire medical team. "I need to know everything about his exploration of the station. Every recording, every sensor reading, every piece of data you have about what he did while he was aboard." As the alien doctors scrambled to compile the requested information, Sarah continued her examination of King Fenris. Her hands moved gently across the barnacle shell, and she seemed to be listening intently to sounds that only she could hear. "There's something else," she said finally. "The barnacles are trying to communicate with us. The bioelectric patterns they're generating, they're not random. There's a structured signal embedded in the background noise." Dr. Yilan of the Telepathic Consortium approached the chamber. "I attempted mental contact with the parasites earlier. Their consciousness was too alien for meaningful communication." Sarah looked up with interest. "What did it feel like? Can you describe the mental contact experience?" "Like touching liquid quantum mechanics with pure thought," Yilan replied. "There was intelligence there, but not in any form I could comprehend." "That's because you were trying to communicate with them as individuals," Sarah realized. "But they're not individual organisms anymore. They're components of a larger biological system. Try thinking of them as cells in a larger organism, not as separate entities." The breakthrough was immediate. When Dr. Yilan approached the barnacles with the mental framework of communicating with a single complex organism rather than millions of simple ones, the contact became clear and coherent. "They are frightened," Yilan reported with surprise. "The organism is young and confused. It was created to protect its host, but it does not understand the current situation. It knows its host is dying, but every time it tries to adapt its protection to help, the environment becomes more hostile." Sarah nodded with satisfaction. "The station systems are responding to our treatment attempts as attacks. The more we try to help King Fenris, the more dangerous the ancient automation thinks we are." The solution was becoming clear, but it would require a level of trust and cooperation that had never been attempted between such disparate forms of intelligence. They needed to find a way to communicate with technology that was millions of years old, using biological intermediaries that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, all while keeping a dying patient alive in an increasingly hostile environment. Sarah looked around at the assembled medical team, representing dozens of different species and technological approaches. "We're going to need to work together in ways that have never been attempted before. Human intuition, alien quantum science, telepathic communication, and ancient automation, all cooperating to save one life. The challenge ahead would test not just their medical knowledge, but their ability to bridge differences between species, technologies, and forms of consciousness that had never encountered each other before. Success would require the best that galactic civilization had to offer, guided by insights that only humanity's unique perspective had been able to provide. The next 18 hours transformed the medical station into something unprecedented in galactic history, a collaborative effort where primitive human intuition guided advanced alien technology toward a solution that neither could have achieved alone. Sarah Chen found herself at the center of a storm of activity as species that had never worked closely together combined their unique abilities under her unconventional leadership. The first breakthrough came when Dr. Yilan successfully established stable telepathic communication with the barnacle organism. Through her mental link, they learned that the biological shield was indeed created by the ancient space station as an emergency medical intervention. The station's automated systems had detected King Fenris's exposure to dimensional radiation and had injected him with adaptive nanobiological organisms designed to protect organic life forms. "The organism is asking for guidance," Yilan reported from her position beside the isolation chamber. "It knows its host is dying, but it cannot understand why its protective measures are insufficient. It is requesting instructions from what it calls the primary biological authority." Sarah realized that the station's systems had been designed to work in cooperation with living beings, not operate independently. The ancient civilization had created technology that required biological oversight to function properly. King Fenris had inadvertently activated an automated medical response without providing the necessary biological guidance to complete the treatment. "We need to establish communication with the space station itself," Sarah determined. "If we can convince its systems that we're qualified medical personnel taking over the case, it should transfer control of the barnacle organism to us." Dr. Thane of the Synthetic Intelligence Collective had been working frantically to decode the communication protocols used between the station and the barnacle organism. "The data transmission is occurring through quantum biological interfaces that our technology cannot directly access. We need a biological intermediary capable of processing quantum information." The solution came from an unexpected source. Commander Vilex, whose crystalline exoskeleton naturally interfaced with both biological and quantum systems, volunteered to serve as a living communication bridge. With Dr. Yilan maintaining telepathic contact with the barnacle organism and Dr. Thane providing technological support, they created a chain of communication that spanned from primitive biological neural networks to ancient quantum automation. The first contact with the space station's systems was overwhelming. The ancient artificial intelligence had been waiting for biological authorization to complete its medical intervention for months, growing increasingly concerned as its patient's condition deteriorated despite its protective measures. Through the translation chain, the station's AI communicated its confusion and frustration. It had detected the presence of multiple biological entities around its patient, but could not establish proper medical authority protocols. Its programming required biological supervision for complex medical procedures, but none of the detected organisms matched its database of authorized biological types. Sarah realized that the ancient civilization had built safeguards into their medical technology to prevent unauthorized or harmful intervention. The station's AI was sophisticated enough to save King Fenris, but its ethical programming required biological oversight from a medically qualified authority. "I need to convince an artificial intelligence that's older than our entire civilization that I'm qualified to supervise its medical procedures," Sarah said, with a mixture of awe and determination. "This is either going to be the greatest medical collaboration in galactic history or a spectacular failure that starts an interstellar war." The process of establishing medical authority with the ancient AI proved to be surprisingly similar to consulting with a colleague. The station's systems subjected Sarah to a comprehensive medical examination through quantum scanning protocols that tested her knowledge, capabilities, and ethical framework. The AI wanted to ensure that any biological authority it accepted would prioritize patient welfare above all other considerations. What surprised both Sarah and the watching alien medical team was how readily the ancient AI accepted her credentials once it completed its evaluation. The sophisticated system seemed to recognize something in human medical philosophy that resonated with its original programming. Through the communication chain, the station's AI explained that its creators had been biological entities remarkably similar to humans in their approach to medical ethics. They had prioritized patient welfare, adaptive problem-solving, and collaborative intervention over technological sophistication. The AI had been programmed to recognize and respond to these philosophical approaches rather than specific technological capabilities. The system is asking for our diagnostic assessment and treatment recommendations, Vilex reported as quantum information flowed through his crystalline matrix. It is ready to modify the barnacle organism according to our medical supervision. Working together, the assembled medical team developed a comprehensive treatment plan that combined human medical intuition with advanced alien technology, guided by the ancient AI's sophisticated biological engineering capabilities. Sarah provided the overall medical strategy, while alien specialists contributed their unique technological approaches to specific aspects of the intervention. The treatment itself was unlike anything in recorded medical history. Rather than fighting against the barnacle organism, they worked with it as a sophisticated medical device. The ancient AI modified the organism's protective protocols, gradually transitioning it from emergency survival mode to active healing mode. Under Sarah's supervision, the barnacle organism began converting the dimensional radiation not just into harmless energy, but into therapeutic frequencies that accelerated King Fenris's natural healing processes. The same organisms that had seemed to be slowly killing him were transformed into the most advanced medical nanites ever encountered. Remarkable, breathed Dr. Kelvix as he monitored the quantum-level changes in real time. The organisms are repairing cellular damage at the molecular level while simultaneously protecting against ongoing radiation exposure. This represents medical technology centuries ahead of our current capabilities. The transformation was visible to the naked eye as the pearl-like shell of barnacles slowly changed color and texture. What had appeared to be a rigid prison became a living, breathing medical interface that allowed King Fenris's body to heal while maintaining protection against the dimensional radiation that still saturated local space. However, the treatment revealed another challenge. The radiation levels around the medical station were continuing to increase, and the ancient AI explained that this was due to the incomplete activation sequence that King Fenris had triggered. The space station's defensive systems would continue escalating their protective measures until either the perceived threat was eliminated or a proper shutdown sequence was completed. "We have a choice," Sarah explained to the assembled medical and command staff. "We can complete King Fenris's healing process here and then evacuate the area before the radiation levels become lethal, or we can attempt to shut down the ancient station's defensive systems permanently." Commander Vilex calculated the implications of both options. Evacuation would save our immediate personnel but leave the space station as a permanent hazard to navigation. The defensive radiation field is expanding at a rate that will threaten shipping routes within the next rotation cycle. Dr. Zethara added her concerns. More importantly, King Fenris's healing process requires the continued cooperation of the ancient AI and the barnacle organism. If we move him away from the station before treatment is complete, we risk losing the quantum biological link that makes the therapy possible. Sarah studied her primitive scanner readings and came to a decision that would require unprecedented trust between species. "We need to board the ancient space station and complete the activation sequence that King Fenris began. The AI is willing to guide us through the process, but it requires biological personnel to physically interface with the control systems." The mission that followed brought together representatives from 6 different species, each contributing their unique capabilities to navigate the ancient station's complex security protocols. Sarah led the team with her medical authority over the AI, while alien specialists provided technological expertise, physical capabilities, and sensory abilities that humans lacked. The ancient space station proved to be a marvel of biological engineering combined with quantum technology. Every surface was alive with microscopic organisms that served as both computational elements and environmental controls. The station had been designed as a living system that could adapt and evolve to meet changing requirements. Under the guidance of the ancient AI, the team navigated through laboratories filled with preserved specimens from hundreds of different species. The station had served as a biological research facility for a civilization that had encountered forms of life from across multiple dimensions and galactic clusters. This facility contains the accumulated biological knowledge of an entire civilization, Dr. Thane observed as they passed through chambers filled with genetic samples and biological data archives. The research conducted here represents millions of years of xenobiological study. The control center of the station was a circular chamber where biological neural networks interfaced directly with quantum computational systems. Sarah approached the central console, a living organism that responded to touch by establishing direct neural contact with her nervous system. Through the connection, she experienced the accumulated knowledge and memories of the ancient civilization. They had been biological engineers who had encountered a threat from entities that existed between dimensions, beings that fed on the life force of organic creatures. The space station had been one of many research facilities dedicated to developing defenses against these interdimensional predators. The civilization had eventually succeeded in driving back the threat, but they had left their defensive systems active to protect future organic life forms that might encounter similar dangers. The barnacle organism was one of their most sophisticated creations, a biological defense system that could adapt to protect any form of organic life against dimensional threats. King Fenris had unknowingly triggered the station's alert systems by carrying residual interdimensional energy signatures from his travels in the Outer Rim territories. The ancient AI had detected these signatures as evidence of renewed interdimensional threat activity and had activated its defensive protocols. Working through the biological interface, Sarah accessed the station's threat assessment systems and updated them with current galactic conditions. She provided the AI with comprehensive data about the current state of interdimensional space, demonstrating that the specific threats the ancient civilization had faced were no longer active. The AI processed this information and made a decision that surprised everyone involved. Rather than simply shutting down its defensive systems, it chose to evolve them. Using the biological samples and genetic databases stored within the station, the AI began creating a new generation of defensive organisms specifically designed to work cooperatively with current galactic civilization. The system is offering us a gift, Sarah realized, as information flowed through the neural interface. It wants to share its medical and defensive technologies with the galactic community, but it requires ongoing biological oversight to ensure the technology is used ethically. The implications were staggering. The ancient AI was essentially offering to teach current galactic civilization medical techniques that were millions of years in advance of anything currently known. The only requirement was that biological entities, preferably those with medical training and ethical frameworks compatible with the original creators, serve as supervisors for the technology. As the updated protocols took effect throughout the station, the dimensional radiation levels began dropping rapidly. The ancient AI recalled the defensive energy projections and reconfigured them into therapeutic fields that would accelerate healing for any organic life forms in the area. Back at the medical station, the changes in King Fenris were immediate and dramatic. The barnacle organism, now operating under updated protocols and human medical supervision, began the final phase of his healing. The pearl-like shell gradually dissolved, revealing the lupine leader in perfect health, his massive frame restored to its full strength and dignity. When King Fenris opened his eyes for the first time in months, the first being he saw was Dr. Sarah Chen, sitting beside his bed with her primitive medical scanner and a gentle smile. "Welcome back, Your Majesty," she said simply. "How are you feeling?" The Wolf King's response would become legendary throughout the Lupine Dominion. He looked at the small human doctor who had saved his life when the entire galactic medical community had failed, and spoke words that would fundamentally change humanity's position in galactic civilization. "I feel like I have been touched by the wisdom of the ancients, guided by the hand of a true healer," he said, his powerful voice filled with reverence. "The human species has shown capabilities that transcend technological advancement. You have demonstrated the rarest of qualities, the ability to see simple truths that others miss in their pursuit of complexity." The political ramifications of the incident were immediate and far-reaching. The Lupine Dominion declared humanity to be their honored allies, offering full military protection and preferential trading status. More importantly, word spread throughout the galactic community about the human doctor who had succeeded where advanced civilizations had failed. Dr. Zethara found herself writing reports that fundamentally challenged the galactic community's assumptions about primitive species and technological superiority. Human medical philosophy emphasizes biological intuition and adaptive problem-solving over technological sophistication, she wrote in her official summary. This approach proved essential in understanding and treating a condition that was beyond the capabilities of more advanced civilizations. The ancient space station, now operating under joint human and AI supervision, became a center for biological research that attracted scientists from across the galaxy. Sarah Chen was offered permanent residency as the facility's chief biological authority, a position that made her one of the most influential beings in galactic civilization, despite her species' primitive status. But perhaps the most significant change was in how other species viewed humanity. The incident demonstrated that technological advancement and wisdom were not synonymous, and that sometimes the most primitive approaches could reveal truths that sophisticated analysis missed. Ambassador Helix of the Diplomatic Corps submitted a formal recommendation that humanity be granted full membership in the galactic community, despite their relatively primitive technology. The human species has demonstrated unique capabilities that complement and enhance the abilities of more advanced civilizations, the report stated. Their inclusion in galactic affairs would benefit all member species. 3 months after King Fenris's recovery, Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the ancient space station, watching ships from dozens of different species arriving to participate in the new biological research initiatives. The primitive medical scanner she had used to save the Wolf King hung at her side, now recognized throughout the galaxy as one of the most important diagnostic tools in medical history. Dr. Martinez joined her at the observation window, looking out at the bustling traffic of galactic civilization. "Hard to believe that a simple stethoscope and basic electromagnetic scanner could change the course of galactic politics," he said. Sarah smiled, remembering her first encounter with the barnacle organism and her decision to trust her human instincts over alien technology. Sometimes the simplest tools reveal the deepest truths. We just needed to remember that healing is about understanding, not just technology. The Wolf King himself had recovered completely, returning to his duties as leader of the Lupine Dominion with a new perspective on the value of different approaches to problem-solving. He had declared that every Lupine medical facility would include human-trained physicians, and that the Dominion's research initiatives would prioritize biological intuition alongside technological advancement. But for Sarah, the greatest reward was the knowledge that humanity had found its place in the galactic community not through superior technology or military strength, but through compassion, intuition, and the willingness to see problems from perspectives that others had overlooked. As she watched the ships carrying representatives from hundreds of different worlds, all coming to learn from the ancient wisdom that human insight had helped unlock, Sarah knew that humanity's journey among the stars had truly begun. They had proven that they belonged not as junior partners in galactic civilization, but as equals whose unique contributions were essential to the community's continued growth and understanding. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders that humanity had yet to discover. But they would face those challenges not as primitive newcomers struggling to catch up, but as valued partners whose perspectives were recognized as indispensable to the success of the entire galactic community. In the end, the case of the Wolf King covered in millions of barnacles had revealed a truth that would reshape galactic civilization, that wisdom could not be measured in technological advancement alone, and that sometimes the greatest breakthroughs came from the simplest insights applied with compassion and understanding.